Unlike other drivers, Daniel never talks much. He always smiles politely, plays soft music, and waits until Emma safely enters her office before driving away. Over time, Emma begins to trust him. Their daily rides slowly turn into conversations. She shares her dreams, her struggles, and her loneliness. Daniel always listens, but never talks about his own life. On rainy evening, Emma notices an old photograph inside the taxi. It shows Daniel wearing a doctor's coat, standing beside a beautiful woman and a little girl. Confused, Emma asks, "Were you a doctor?" Daniel immediately removes the photo. His smile disappears. He quietly replies, "That was a lifetime ago." Emma becomes curious. A few days later, Daniel suddenly stops coming to work. His phone is switched off. Worried, Emma starts searching for him. She eventually discovers a heartbreaking truth. Daniel was once one of the city's most respected heart surgeons. 5 years earlier, a terrible car accident killed his wife and 6-year-old daughter. Although he survived, he blamed himself because he had been driving that night. Unable to forgive himself, he left the hospital, sold everything he owned, and became a taxi driver. He believed he no longer deserved to save lives. Emma refuses to let him disappear. She visits him every day. Slowly, she helps him smile again. Their friendship turns into love. But just when Daniel begins to believe in happiness again, Emma is diagnosed with a rare heart disease. The only surgeon capable of saving her is Daniel himself. But after 5 years away from medicine, can he perform one final surgery on the woman he loves? Ending twist, Daniel performs the surgery. It is successful. Months later, Emma wakes up healthy. She asks the nurse, "Where is Daniel?" The nurse lowers her head. Daniel suffered a fatal heart attack during the operation because of extreme stress and exhaustion. Before the surgery, he had written one final letter. 5 years ago, I couldn't save the 2 people I loved most. Today, I finally saved the 3rd. The next morning, Emma left her apartment at exactly 8 a.m. As usual, the same silver taxi was waiting outside. Daniel stepped out and opened the door with a warm smile. "Good morning." "Morning," Emma replied, smiling back. She sat in the back seat. The taxi pulled away from the curb. Soft piano music played quietly through the speakers. Unlike other drivers, Daniel never asked personal questions. He didn't complain about traffic. He didn't talk on the phone. He simply drove. Emma found it peaceful. After a few minutes, she broke the silence. "You always start work this early?" Daniel smiled through the rearview mirror. "Earlier." "What time?" 5 in the morning. Emma laughed. "That's crazy." Daniel chuckled softly. "Maybe." She looked out the window. "I can barely wake up before 8. Daniel didn't reply. Instead, he turned the music down slightly. It made Emma smile. He always seemed to notice the little things. When they reached her office, Emma searched her bag. "Oh no." She froze. "My wallet." She looked everywhere. It wasn't there. "I'm so sorry," she said nervously. "I think I left it at home." Daniel shook his head. "It's okay." "No, I'll transfer the money later." "You don't have to." Emma looked surprised. "But I trust you." For a moment, she didn't know what to say. No stranger had ever trusted her so easily. "I'll pay tomorrow," she promised. Daniel nodded. "I know." She stepped out of the taxi. Before entering the office, she turned around. The taxi was still there. Daniel waited until she safely walked through the building's front doors. Only then did he drive away. Emma frowned. Why does he always wait? That evening, after work, heavy rain began pouring across the city. People rushed to find shelter. Emma stood outside the office, unable to get a taxi. Suddenly, the familiar silver car stopped in front of her. Daniel rolled down the window. "Need a ride?" Emma smiled with relief. "I was hoping you'd show up." For the first time, Daniel smiled a little wider. And neither of them noticed that someone across the street was quietly watching them. A man in a black coat took a photo of Daniel's taxi, then disappeared into the crowd. The rain continued to pour as Daniel drove through the quiet streets. Emma wrapped her hands around a warm cup of coffee she had bought on the way. "Here," she said, holding out the second cup. "I got one for you, too." Daniel looked surprised. "You didn't have to." "I know," Emma smiled. "But I wanted to." For a moment he hesitated. Then he accepted it. Thank you. It was the first gift anyone had given him in years. The ride continued in comfortable silence. As the taxi stopped at a red light, Emma's eyes wandered around the car. Everything was neat and clean. No decorations, no lucky charms. Just one old photograph tucked beside the dashboard. It showed a smiling man in a white doctor's coat. Standing beside him was a beautiful young woman, holding the hand of a little girl with curly hair. They looked like a perfect family. Emma leaned forward. Is that your family? Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He glanced at the photo for only a second. Without a word, he removed it from the dashboard and placed it inside the glove compartment. His smile disappeared. Yes, he answered quietly. Emma immediately realized she had touched a painful memory. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked. Daniel shook his head. It's okay. But his voice sounded different. Sadder. The rest of the journey passed in silence. When they reached Emma's apartment, she stepped out of the taxi. Before closing the door, she looked back at him. I hope, whatever happened, one day it hurts a little less. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Then he gave a faint smile. So do I. The taxi slowly drove away. That night, Emma couldn't stop thinking about the photograph. The next morning, she waited outside her apartment. 8 o'clock came. Then 8:10, 8:15. But Daniel's silver taxi never arrived. Instead, a different driver stopped. Emma frowned. Where's Daniel? The driver looked confused. You know him? Yes, he usually picks me up. The man sighed. He hasn't been working since yesterday. Emma felt a strange heaviness in her chest. What happened to him? The driver shook his head. I don't know. As the taxi drove away, Emma stared out the window. For the first time, she realized she was worried about someone she barely knew. Daniel didn't come back the next day, or the day after that. Every morning, Emma looked for the familiar silver taxi. Every morning, someone else arrived. She told herself it shouldn't matter. He was just a taxi driver, but somehow it did. 3 days later, Emma couldn't ignore the feeling anymore. After work, she went to the taxi company. A middle-aged receptionist looked up from her desk. Can I help you? I'm looking for one of your drivers, Emma said. And his name is Daniel. The woman's smile faded. Daniel hasn't driven this week. Is he okay? The receptionist hesitated. I'm sorry. We can't share our driver's personal information. Emma nodded. I understand. She turned to leave. Just then, an elderly driver who had overheard the conversation called out, You're talking about Daniel? Emma turned around. Yes. The old man sighed. He's a good man. What happened to him? He disappeared for a few days. Does he do that often? The driver looked down. Every year. Emma frowned. Every year? He nodded slowly. On the same date. Emma's heart skipped a beat. Why? The old driver was silent for a moment. Then he quietly said, That's the day his family died. Emma froze. What? Before she could ask another question, the receptionist interrupted. That's enough. The old man nodded and walked away. But as Emma reached the door, he slipped a small folded piece of paper into her hand. She opened it outside. It was an address. Written beneath it were 4 words. If you truly care, go see him. Emma looked at the address. It led to a quiet neighborhood on the edge of the city. Without thinking twice, she hailed a taxi. An hour later, she stood in front of a small old house. The curtains were closed. The garden was overgrown. The place looked forgotten. Emma took a deep breath and knocked on the door. No answer. She knocked again. Still nothing. Just as she was about to leave, she heard slow footsteps from inside. The door creaked open. Daniel stood there. His beard had grown. His eyes were red from sleepless nights. For the first time, he didn't smile. Daniel stood silently in the doorway. His eyes looked tired. His face was pale. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. Emma, what are you doing here? She held up the small piece of paper. I was worried. Daniel glanced at the address in her hand. So someone told you? Emma nodded. I just wanted to know if you were okay. Daniel looked away. I'm fine. It was obvious he wasn't. Emma noticed his trembling hands. "Can I come in?" Daniel hesitated. Then he slowly stepped aside. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Everything inside was perfectly clean, but it felt as if time had stopped years ago. On one wall hung dozens of framed photographs. Most of them showed Daniel with the same woman and little girl Emma had seen in the taxi. The little girl was laughing while sitting on his shoulders. Another photo showed all three of them celebrating her birthday. Emma smiled sadly. "They looked so happy." Daniel stared at the pictures. "They were my whole world." He walked toward a small bookshelf. On top of it sat a pink teddy bear covered in dust. He gently picked it up. "It was Lily's favorite," Emma softly asked. "Your daughter?" Daniel nodded. "She was 6. His voice cracked. "Every night she slept holding this bear." The room fell silent. Emma didn't know what to say. She simply stood beside him. After a long pause, Daniel whispered, "I was driving that night." Emma looked at him. It was raining. "I was coming home from the hospital. My wife kept telling me to slow down." He closed his eyes. "I didn't." Tears filled them. "A truck ran a red light." His voice broke. "I survived." But they didn't. Emma felt tears welling up in her own eyes. Daniel looked at the family photo on the wall. "I've spent 5 years asking myself the same question. What if I had driven a little slower? What if I had taken another road? What if—" Emma gently placed her hand on his shoulder. "It wasn't your fault." Daniel shook his head. "Maybe, but I still live with it every single day." At that moment, Emma noticed a dusty wooden box on the table. Inside it was a neatly folded white doctor's coat and a shiny hospital ID card. She picked it up. The words printed on it made her heart stop. Dr. Daniel Carter, Chief Cardiac Surgeon. Emma looked at him in complete shock. "You weren't just a doctor. You were one of the best heart surgeons in the city." Daniel lowered his head. "I was." Emma stared at the hospital ID card in disbelief. "Dr. Daniel Carter, Chief Cardiac Surgeon." She looked back at Daniel. "You saved lives every day." Daniel gave a faint smile. "I used to." Emma carefully placed the ID card back into the box. "Why didn't you ever go back?" Daniel walked to the window and looked outside. "The morning after the accident, I went to the hospital. I put on my white coat. I walked into the operating room." He paused. "My hands wouldn't stop shaking." Emma listened quietly. "I looked at the patient on the table. All I could see was my daughter." His voice became almost a whisper. "I couldn't even hold the scalpel. So I walked out. And I never went back." Emma felt her heart ache. "But people needed you." Daniel nodded. "They did. And I failed them too." The words hit Emma harder than she expected. "You didn't fail anyone." Daniel looked at her. "I couldn't save the people who mattered most. So how could I believe I deserved to save strangers?" Silence filled the room. A few moments later, Emma smiled gently. "You know, when I first got into your taxi, I thought you were just another driver." Daniel let out a quiet laugh. "So did everyone else. But now I know why you always wait until your passengers get inside safely." Daniel looked surprised. Emma continued, "You couldn't protect your family. So now you try to protect every stranger." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. For the first time in 5 years. Someone understood him. A knock on the front door suddenly broke the silence. Daniel opened it. A young boy, no older than 10, stood outside. "Mr. Daniel, my grandma asked if you could take her to the hospital." Daniel looked down. "I'm not working today." The boy lowered his head. "We don't have enough money for another taxi." Without saying another word, Daniel picked up his car keys. "I'll get the car." Emma watched him walk away. A small smile appeared on her face. Maybe the doctor inside him had never really disappeared. Daniel drove the old woman and her grandson to the hospital without saying a word. When they arrived, the elderly woman searched her purse nervously. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I only have $10. Daniel smiled gently and closed the meter. "You don't owe me anything." The old woman looked at him with tearful eyes. "God bless you, son." As she walked inside with her grandson, Emma turned to Daniel. You do this a lot, don't you? Daniel shrugged. Sometimes. How many people have you given free rides to? I've never counted. Emma smiled. You should. Daniel looked out the windshield. Kindness isn't something you count. Those words stayed in Emma's mind. On the drive back, they stopped at a red light. An ambulance rushed past them with its siren blaring. Daniel instinctively looked toward it. For a moment, his eyes followed it until it disappeared. Emma noticed. You still miss it, don't you? Daniel didn't answer immediately. Finally, he said, every single day. That evening, Emma couldn't stop thinking about him. The next morning, she walked out of her apartment with 2 coffee cups in her hands. As expected, Daniel's silver taxi was waiting. She opened the front passenger door instead of sitting in the back. Daniel looked surprised. You usually sit in the back. Emma smiled. I think we're friends now. For the first time in days. Daniel laughed. A real laugh. As they drove toward her office, Emma handed him one of the coffees. No arguing this time. Daniel accepted it. Thank you. Just then, his phone rang through the car's Bluetooth system. The screen displayed one name. St. Mary's Hospital. Daniel's smile disappeared. He stared at the screen. But he didn't answer. The phone kept ringing. Emma quietly looked at him. Maybe you should pick up. Daniel tightened his grip on the steering wheel. The ringing stopped. A few seconds later, a voicemail notification appeared. Daniel's face turned pale. He whispered, They've never called me before. Not in 5 years. The voicemail notification stayed on the screen. Neither of them spoke. Daniel kept his eyes on the road, pretending he hadn't seen it. Emma looked at him. You don't have to listen to it now. Daniel gave a small nod, but his hands tightened around the steering wheel. After dropping Emma at her office, he parked the taxi a few streets away. For nearly 5 minutes, he just stared at his phone. Finally, he pressed play. A familiar voice came through the speaker. Dr. Daniel Carter. This is Dr. Michael Hayes from St. Mary's Hospital. It's been a long time. We have a 12-year-old patient with a rare heart condition. We've tried everything. You're the only surgeon who has successfully performed this operation. I know you left medicine, but if you can hear this, please come. The message ended. Daniel closed his eyes. His breathing became heavy. 5 years of painful memories rushed back. The operating room. The accident. His wife. His daughter. He switched off his phone and drove away. That evening, Emma found Daniel sitting alone in his taxi near a quiet riverside. The engine was off. He was just staring at the water. She walked over slowly. You heard the message, didn't you? Daniel nodded. They want me back. Emma smiled softly. That's a good thing. He shook his head. What if my hands fail again? What if I lose another patient? Emma sat beside him on a nearby bench. Daniel, 5 years ago you lost your family, but that doesn't mean you've lost your gift. He looked at her. I'm scared. Emma gently smiled. The bravest people aren't the ones who aren't afraid. They're the ones who move forward despite being afraid. Daniel was silent. For the first time in years, someone believed in him more than he believed in himself. Just then his phone rang again. The hospital. This time, Daniel slowly reached for it. Daniel stared at the ringing phone. His heart pounded. Emma looked at him but said nothing. She knew the decision had to be his. After a long moment, Daniel answered. Hello. A relieved voice came from the other end. Dr. Carter! Thank God you picked up. It was Dr. Michael Hayes. The boy's condition is getting worse. We don't have much time. Daniel closed his eyes. I'm not a surgeon anymore. There was a brief silence. Then Dr. Hayes said quietly, Maybe not. But you're still the best heart surgeon I've ever known. Daniel looked down at his trembling hands. I don't know if I can do it. You won't know unless you try. The call ended. Emma smiled gently. What are you thinking? Daniel let out a deep breath. I'm thinking, I've spent 5 years running away. He looked at the hospital building in the distance. Maybe it's time to stop. Emma's face lit up. I'll go with you. An hour later, they arrived at St. Mary's Hospital. As Daniel walked through the entrance, nurses and doctors stopped in their tracks. Some whispered, Is that really Dr. Carter? I can't believe he's back. A young nurse smiled through tears. He trained me. Dr. Michael Hayes hurried toward him. For a second, neither man spoke. Then Michael stepped forward and hugged him. It's good to see you again. Daniel managed a small smile. It's good to be back. I think. Michael handed him a patient file. 12 years old. His name is Noah. Daniel opened the file. His expression suddenly changed. The medical reports looked familiar. Very familiar, he whispered. This can't be. Emma looked at him. What is it? Daniel slowly turned the page. His hands began to shake. I created this surgical procedure, and I was supposed to teach it to the hospital. He looked at Michael. But I disappeared before I ever did. Michael nodded sadly. We've been trying to perform it without you for 5 years. Daniel took a deep breath. Then, for the first time since the accident, he reached for a white doctor's coat. 5 years. It had been 5 long years since he had worn one. His fingers trembled as he slowly slipped it on. For a moment, he looked at himself in the mirror. He didn't see the confident surgeon he once was. He saw a broken man trying to remember who he used to be. A soft knock came from the door. It was Emma. She smiled when she saw him. I think it still suits you. Daniel looked down at the coat and gave a nervous smile. I never thought I'd wear this again. Emma stepped closer. You belong here? Before Daniel could reply, Dr. Michael Hayes entered. The patient's family is waiting. Daniel nodded. They walked together toward the waiting room. A woman in her early 30s immediately stood up. Tears filled her eyes. Dr. Carter. She grabbed his hands. Please save my son. I don't care how much it costs. Just don't let him die. Daniel looked through the small glass window into Noah's hospital room. The 12-year-old boy lay unconscious, connected to several machines. For a split second, Daniel didn't see Noah. He saw his own 6-year-old daughter lying in a hospital bed. His breathing became uneven. His hands started shaking again. Emma quietly placed her hand on his arm. She didn't say a word. She simply stood beside him. Daniel closed his eyes. He took one deep breath, then another. When he opened them again, Noah was just Noah. Not Lily, not the past. Just a little boy who needed help. Daniel turned to Dr. Hayes. Prepare the operating room. Michael smiled with relief. I already have. As Daniel walked toward the operating theater, every doctor and nurse in the hallway stopped what they were doing. They watched him in silence. The legendary surgeon had returned, but just before he pushed open the operating room doors, a nurse came running toward him. Dr. Carter! He turned around. The patient's latest test results just came in. They found something we didn't expect. Daniel took the report. His expression changed instantly. This surgery just became far more dangerous. Daniel stared at the medical report. His face turned pale. Dr. Hayes stepped closer. What is it? Daniel handed him the file. The damage isn't only in Noah's heart. The main artery is weaker than we thought. Hayes read the report. His expression changed immediately. If it tears during surgery, Daniel finished the sentence. He won't survive. The room fell silent. Outside the operating room, Noah's mother looked through the glass window. She was praying with tears in her eyes. Emma stood beside her, trying to comfort her. Daniel took a deep breath. How much time do we have? Less than 2 hours, Hayes replied. If we wait any longer, his heart will fail. Daniel looked at the operating room doors. 5 years ago, he had walked away from this place. Today, a little boy's life depended on him. He slowly removed his wedding ring from a chain around his neck. He looked at it for a moment. Then he placed it carefully inside his locker. Hayes noticed. You always removed it before every difficult surgery. Daniel smiled faintly. My wife used to say, come back wearing it. For the first time in years, he felt as though she was still with him. He looked at Hayes. Let's save this boy. The operating room doors opened. Bright surgical lights filled the room. Doctors and nurses took their positions. Daniel walked to the operating table. Noah lay unconscious beneath the lights. Daniel picked up the surgical gloves. His hands were perfectly steady. A young nurse whispered, His hands aren't shaking anymore. Hayes smiled. No. Dr. Carter is back. Daniel looked around the room. "Everyone ready?" "Ready," he nodded. "Scalpel." The operation had begun, but hundreds of miles away, a black SUV pulled into the hospital parking lot. A man in a dark suit stepped out. He looked at Daniel's name on the hospital entrance. A cold smile appeared on his face. "So, I finally found you." Inside the operating room, the atmosphere was silent. Only the sound of the heart monitor filled the air. "Beep, beep, beep." Daniel's eyes never left Noah's heart. "Scalpel." The nurse placed it in his hand. His movements were calm, precise, just like they had been years ago. Outside the operating room, Emma sat beside Noah's mother. She silently prayed that Daniel would succeed. At that moment, a tall man in a black suit walked into the hospital. He carried a leather briefcase. His expression was cold. He walked straight to the reception desk. "I'm looking for Dr. Daniel Carter." The receptionist frowned. "May I ask who's asking?" The man smiled politely. "Tell him. Richard Mason is here." The receptionist called Dr. Hayes. A few minutes later, Hayes stepped into the hallway. The moment he saw Richard, his face turned serious. "What are you doing here?" Richard looked toward the operating room. "I heard Daniel came back. I wanted to congratulate him." Hayes didn't believe him. "You disappeared 5 years ago." Richard adjusted his tie. "So did Daniel." Hayes crossed his arms. "Leave." Richard smiled. "I can't. Not until I speak with him." Inside the operating room, Daniel carefully repaired one damaged artery. The medical team watched in amazement. One of the young surgeons whispered, "I've only seen techniques like this in textbooks." Hayes' assistant smiled proudly, "Because Dr. Carter wrote those textbooks." Just then, a nurse rushed into the operating room. "Dr. Carter, Hayes told me this couldn't wait." Daniel looked up. "What is it?" She hesitated. "There's someone outside asking for you. He says his name is Richard Mason." The surgical instrument stopped moving. Daniel's face lost all color. For the first time during the operation, his hands froze. He whispered, "Dear Richard." The heart monitor suddenly began beeping faster. Beep, beep, beep. Noah's condition was changing. Daniel had only seconds to decide. Finish the surgery, or face the man who had destroyed his past. The operating room fell silent. Daniel closed his eyes for a second. Then he looked at the nurse. "Tell him he'll have to wait." The nurse nodded and hurried out. Daniel turned back to Noah. "My patient comes first." Scalpel. The operation continued. Outside, Richard Mason smiled when he heard Daniel's answer. "He hasn't changed," he murmured. "He still puts everyone else first." 3 hours later, the operating room doors finally opened. Daniel slowly walked out, exhausted. He removed his surgical mask. Noah's mother ran toward him. "Doctor!" Daniel smiled. The surgery was successful. The woman burst into tears and hugged him. "Thank you. Thank you so much." For the first time in years, Daniel truly smiled. Emma watched him from across the hallway. She had never seen him look so alive. But the moment Daniel looked up, he saw Richard standing at the end of the corridor. Their eyes met. The smile disappeared from Daniel's face. Without saying a word, Richard walked toward him. "It's been a long time, Daniel." Daniel's voice was cold. "What do you want?" Richard looked around. "I think we should talk somewhere private. I have nothing to say to you." Richard leaned closer. "I think you do. Especially after you learn the truth about your family's accident." Daniel froze. Emma looked at him in confusion. "What truth?" Richard sighed. "For 5 years. You've blamed yourself. You believed you caused the crash." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I was driving." "Yes." Richard looked him straight in the eyes. "But you didn't cause the accident." Daniel's heart skipped a beat. Richard slowly opened his briefcase. Inside was an old police investigation file. He placed it in Daniel's hands. "The truck driver who hit your car didn't run the red light by accident." Daniel stared at him. "What are you talking about?" Richard's voice became quiet. "It wasn't an accident. It was planned." Emma's eyes widened in shock. Daniel could barely breathe. Who would do something like that? Richard looked directly into his eyes. "They weren't trying to kill your family. They were trying to kill you. Daniel couldn't believe what he had just heard. He stared at Richard in silence. You're lying. Richard slowly shook his head. I wish I was. He opened the investigation file. Inside were old police reports, photographs of the crash and witness statements. Daniel's hands trembled as he turned the pages. One photo showed the truck that had hit his car. Another showed the destroyed vehicle where his wife and daughter had died. Daniel quickly closed the file. I've seen enough. Richard looked at him. No, you haven't. He pulled out one final document. It was kept confidential. Daniel read the first line. Target Dr. Daniel Carter. His breathing stopped. What is this? Richard answered quietly. 5 years ago, you were preparing to testify in court. Emma looked confused. Testify? About what? Richard sighed. You discovered that a powerful pharmaceutical company was selling defective, artificial heart valves. They bribed doctors to stay silent. But Daniel refused. Daniel's memories came rushing back. Late-night meetings, threatening phone calls, anonymous letters. He had ignored them all. I was going to expose them, he whispered. Richard nodded. The night before you were supposed to testify, the accident happened. Emma covered her mouth in shock. So it wasn't an accident? Richard shook his head. No. They wanted to stop Daniel forever. Daniel leaned against the wall. Everything he had believed for 5 years, everything he had blamed himself for, was a lie. Tears filled his eyes. My wife, my daughter, they died because of me. Richard immediately corrected him. No, they died because of criminals. Before Daniel could respond, a police officer hurried down the hallway. Dr. Carter, we need to speak with you. Daniel looked up. What happened? The officer's face was serious. The company you were about to expose. They know you've returned. Emma felt a chill run through her body. The officer continued. And according to our information, they're planning to finish what they started. The hospital suddenly didn't feel safe anymore. The hallway fell silent. Emma looked at the police officer. Are you saying Daniel is still in danger? The officer nodded. We intercepted a phone call this morning. They know Dr. Carter is back. Daniel frowned. Who are they? The officer glanced around to make sure no one was listening. The executives of Meditech Pharmaceuticals. They never wanted the truth to come out. Richard added quietly. They've spent 5 years making sure every piece of evidence disappeared. Daniel clenched his fists. So why come after me now? Because, Richard replied. The moment you stepped back into that operating room, people started talking. The media is calling your return a miracle. If you decide to speak again, the secret is finished. Emma stepped closer to Daniel. Then let the police protect you. The officer shook his head. We can assign security. But we can't guarantee your safety. At that moment, Daniel's phone buzzed. An unknown number. He answered. Hello? A cold voice spoke from the other end. You should have stayed a taxi driver, Dr. Carter. Daniel's expression darkened. Who is this? You've already lost your wife. You've already lost your daughter. A long pause. It would be a shame if you lost someone else. The call ended. Daniel slowly lowered the phone. Emma's face turned pale. Was that? Daniel nodded. They know about you. Emma forced a smile. I'm not afraid. But I am, Daniel replied. He looked into her eyes. I couldn't protect my family. I won't let anything happen to you. Just then, a nurse rushed down the corridor. Dr. Carter! Noah is awake. Daniel and Emma hurried into the room. The 12-year-old smiled weakly. You saved me. Daniel's eyes filled with emotion. Noah reached under his pillow and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I drew this while I was waiting for surgery. He handed it to Daniel. It was a simple drawing. A little boy holding hands with the doctor wearing a white coat. Above them were the words, My hero. Daniel stared at the drawing. For the first time in 5 years, he no longer saw himself as the man who failed. He saw the man who could still save lives. But outside the hospital, a black car was parked across the street. Inside, a man watched Daniel through binoculars. He picked up his phone. The doctor isn't broken anymore. A voice replied, then break him again. Daniel carefully folded Noah's drawing and placed it inside his coat pocket. "I'll keep this forever," he said with a smile. Noah grinned. "When I grow up, I want to become a doctor." "Just like you." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "I hope one day you're even better than me." Emma watched the moment quietly. For the first time, she saw genuine happiness on Daniel's face. That evening, Daniel and Emma left the hospital together. 2 police officers escorted them to the parking lot. "It should be safe now," one officer said. Daniel nodded. "Thank you." Emma looked at him. "How about dinner?" Daniel smiled. "I'd like that." Just as they reached Daniel's silver taxi, a black SUV sped toward them. "Daniel!" Emma screamed. The SUV accelerated instead of stopping. Daniel reacted instantly. He grabbed Emma's arm and pulled her behind another parked car. Crash! The SUV slammed into Daniel's taxi, smashing the front of the vehicle. Glass exploded across the parking lot. People screamed and ran for cover. The SUV didn't stop. It disappeared into the traffic within seconds. Police officers immediately rushed forward. "Call for backup." "Block every exit." Daniel stood frozen. He stared at his destroyed taxi. Emma slowly held his hand. "Are you okay?" Daniel nodded silently. Then he looked at the wrecked taxi. 5 years, thousands of passengers, countless memories. His second home, gone? An officer walked over. "We found this." He handed Daniel a small white envelope that had been thrown from the SUV. Daniel opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper. In bold black letters it read, "The next time, we won't miss." Emma felt her heart race. She looked at Daniel. "What do we do now?" Daniel folded the note and slipped it into his pocket. His expression had changed. The fear was gone. Only determination remained. "They wanted me to run away once. I did." He looked toward the dark city skyline. "I'm not running anymore." The attack on Daniel's taxi became the biggest news story in the city. Television channels called it an attempted murder. Police officers surrounded the hospital. Reporters waited outside the entrance. Emma looked at Daniel. "You should stay somewhere safe." Daniel shook his head. "If I hide now, they'll never stop." Just then, Detective Harris walked into the room. "We've got something." Daniel stood up. "What is it?" "The driver of the black SUV has been found." Emma's face lit up. "So he confessed?" The detective's expression remained serious. "He can't." "Why?" "Because someone shot him before we reached him." The room fell silent. They wanted to make sure he never talked. Daniel lowered his head. "They're cleaning up every witness." The detective nodded. "But we found someone else." Daniel looked up. "Who?" "A former employee of Meditech Pharmaceuticals. He says he has documents proving the company ordered the attack on your family." Emma smiled with relief. "That's incredible." The detective continued. "But there's a problem. He's terrified. He'll only speak to one person." Daniel frowned. "Who?" "You." That evening, the police secretly drove Daniel and Emma to an old motel on the edge of the city. Room 214. The witness was waiting inside. Daniel slowly opened the door. A nervous man in his 50s stood by the window. He looked exhausted. "I've been waiting 5 years to tell you the truth." Daniel stepped inside. "My name is Daniel Carter." The man nodded. "I know who you are." He placed a thick folder on the table. "Everything you need is in there. The fake medical reports, the bribery records, the names of everyone involved." Daniel reached for the folder. Before he could open it, a loud gunshot shattered the window. Bang! The witness collapsed to the floor. Emma screamed. Daniel rushed toward him. Blood spread across the man's shirt. With his last breath, the witness grabbed Daniel's hand. He whispered only 4 words. "Trust." No one inside. His hand fell limp. The room went silent. Someone inside the police department was working for the enemy. The motel room was filled with chaos. Police officers rushed inside. "Everyone get down!" Detective Harris knelt beside the witness. He checked for a pulse. After a few seconds, he slowly stood up. "He's gone." Emma covered her mouth, trying to hold back her tears. Daniel looked at the folder lying on the floor. It was stained with blood. He quickly picked it up. Most of the documents were still inside. Before anyone could stop him, Daniel opened the file. There were bank records, confidential emails, secret contracts, and one page titled Operation Silence. Daniel's eyes moved down the list. Then he froze. One of the names was someone he knew.
Very well.
No. Emma looked at him.
What is it?
Daniel slowly turned the folder toward Detective Harris. The detective's face turned pale. The last name on the list was Dr. Michael Hayes. Emma couldn't believe it.
That's impossible.
He called you back to the hospital. He helped you. Daniel shook his head. He also knew exactly where I'd be. At that moment, Detective Harris's phone rang. He answered quickly. What? His expression changed instantly. He turned to Daniel. Dr. Hayes has disappeared. Daniel's heart sank. Since when? About 30 minutes ago. Emma whispered. He knew the witness was going to talk. Before anyone could respond, Daniel's phone vibrated. A new message from an unknown number. It contained only one sentence. Don't trust heroes. They wear white coats too. Daniel clenched his jaw. 5 years ago, he had trusted everyone around him. He had lost everything. Now, he didn't know who his real enemy was, or who was still telling the truth. The drive back from the motel was silent. Emma sat beside Daniel, staring out the window. Neither of them wanted to believe it. Dr. Michael Hayes, the man who had welcomed Daniel back, the man who had stood beside him during Noah's surgery, the man who had been his friend for nearly 15 years. It didn't make sense. Yet the evidence was there, and now Michael had disappeared. The next morning, Detective Harris arrived with new information. We searched Michael's house. Daniel immediately looked up. What did you find? Nothing. What do you mean, nothing? The detective sighed. His clothes are gone. His laptop is gone. His phone is gone. He planned this. Emma frowned. So he's guilty. Harris shook his head. Not necessarily. Then why run? That's what we're trying to figure out. Just then, Daniel's phone rang. An unknown number. Everyone in the room froze. Daniel answered. Hello? A familiar voice replied. Daniel, it's Michael. Emma's eyes widened. Detective Harris immediately activated the phone trace. Daniel stood up. Where are you? Michael sounded exhausted. Listen carefully. You don't have much time. Daniel's voice hardened.
Are you involved?
There was silence. Then Michael said, No. But someone wants you to believe I am. Daniel exchanged a glance with Emma. If you're innocent, why are you hiding? Michael took a deep breath. Because 2 men tried to kill me last night. The room went silent. What? I found evidence linking Meditech to the attacks. Before I could hand it over, they came for me. Daniel frowned. Then where are you? I can't tell you over the phone. Why? Because they're listening. The call suddenly became distorted. Static filled the line. Michael's voice returned. Weak and broken. Daniel, there's something you don't know. What? It's not just the company. They have someone much higher. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. Higher than who? Michael answered with 3 words. The Attorney General. The line went dead. And at that exact moment, a black van pulled up outside the building. Daniel slowly lowered his phone. The room was silent. The Attorney General? Emma whispered. Detective Harris looked stunned. If that's true, this case is much bigger than we imagined. Before anyone could speak again, bang! The front entrance of the building exploded open. 4 masked men wearing black tactical gear rushed inside. Everybody on the floor! People screamed and ran in every direction. One of the gunmen pointed directly at Daniel. There he is! Detective Harris pulled out his weapon. Police, drop your guns! A shootout erupted. Daniel grabbed Emma's hand. This way! They ran through a side hallway as bullets shattered the windows behind them. Glass flew across the floor. An emergency alarm echoed through the building. Emma was breathing heavily. They're trying to kill us. Daniel shook his head. No, they're trying to stop the truth. They reached the emergency exit and pushed the door open. The parking lot was almost empty. Daniel spotted an old delivery van with the keys still inside. "Get in!" Emma jumped into the passenger seat. Daniel started the engine just as two black SUVs sped into the parking lot.
They're here!
Emma shouted. Daniel slammed his foot on the accelerator. The van shot forward. The SUVs followed immediately. The chase raced through the city streets. One SUV pulled alongside them. A masked man leaned out of the window, holding a rifle. Emma screamed. "Daniel!" Bang! The bullet shattered the driver's side mirror. Daniel swerved sharply, narrowly avoiding another car. Suddenly, a police helicopter appeared overhead. "Loudspeaker, this is the police. Pull over immediately." The attackers looked up. Realizing they were outnumbered, the SUVs turned down different streets and disappeared into traffic. Daniel finally stopped the van beneath an overpass. Both he and Emma sat in silence, trying to catch their breath. Emma looked at him. "They'll never stop chasing us." Daniel nodded. "I know." Just then, Detective Harris called. His voice was urgent. "Daniel, there's bad news." "What happened?" "The hospital just called. Noah has been kidnapped." Daniel's heart stopped. "What do you mean? Noah has been kidnapped?" Detective Harris spoke quickly. "About 20 minutes ago, two men dressed as hospital staff entered his room. They showed fake transfer papers. The nurses believed them. By the time we realized they were fake, they were gone." Emma covered her mouth in shock. "Oh my God." Daniel clenched his fists. "They're using a 12-year-old boy." Harris nodded. "We've already issued a citywide alert. But there's something else." "What?" "The kidnappers left a message." Daniel's voice became cold. "Read it." Harris unfolded the note. "Bring us every document you have, or the boy dies." Silence filled the room. Emma looked at Daniel. "You can't let them hurt Noah." Daniel stared at the blood-stained folder from the motel. Inside, it was enough evidence to expose one of the biggest medical corruption scandals in the country. If he handed it over, the criminals would walk free. If he didn't, an innocent child could die. His phone suddenly buzzed. A video call. "Unknown number," Daniel answered. The screen showed Noah sitting in a chair. His hands were tied, but he wasn't crying. A masked man stepped into view. "You have 24 hours. Bring the folder. No police, no tricks. Or the boy never comes home." The call ended. Emma looked at Daniel with tears in her eyes. "What are we going to do?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. He opened the folder one last time. Then he carefully removed a small USB drive hidden inside the back cover. Emma frowned. "What's that?" Daniel smiled for the first time in hours. The witness was smarter than they thought. The real evidence was never in the papers. Before he could explain further, the USB drive slipped from his hand and fell onto the floor. Emma picked it up. On the back, written in tiny black letters, were 4 words. "Open only with Michael." Daniel and Emma looked at each other. The one man everyone thought was a traitor might be the only person who could save Noah. Emma stared at the words engraved on the USB drive. "Open only with Michael." She looked at Daniel. "So, Michael was telling the truth?" Daniel slipped the USB into his pocket. "I don't know. But if the witness trusted him, then we need to find him before they do." Detective Harris stepped forward. "I think I know where he is." Daniel frowned. "You do?" Harris nodded. 5 years ago, Michael bought an old cabin outside the city. He used it whenever he wanted complete privacy. If he's hiding anywhere, it's there. An hour later, Daniel, Emma, and Detective Harris drove deep into the mountains. The narrow road ended at an old wooden cabin beside a lake. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. Daniel knocked on the door. No answer. He slowly pushed it open. The cabin was empty. Coffee was still warm on the table. Someone had been there only minutes earlier. Emma noticed muddy footprints leading to the basement. "Daniel, I think someone's down there." They carefully walked downstairs. At the end of the hallway, a weak voice called out, "Daniel!" It was Michael. His hands were tied to a chair. His face was bruised. Daniel rushed forward. "Michael!" He untied the ropes. Michael could barely stand. "They found me. They wanted the USB. Daniel pulled it from his pocket.
I have it.
Michael immediately shook his head. Don't plug it into any computer. Emma looked confused. Why not? Michael took a deep breath. It's encrypted. It can only be opened with my fingerprint and my password. Daniel looked relieved. Then let's do it. Michael's expression suddenly turned serious. You need to know something first. He looked directly at Daniel. The evidence on that USB doesn't just expose Meditech. It exposes everyone who protected them. The Attorney General, judges, police officers, and even members of Parliament. Emma whispered, if this gets out, the whole country will be shaken. Before anyone could say another word, the lights in the cabin suddenly went out. The room went completely dark. A red laser sight appeared on Daniel's chest. Then another. And another. They weren't alone. The red laser sights remained fixed on Daniel's chest. Emma's heart raced. Michael whispered, don't move. A voice echoed through the dark cabin. Hand over the USB. No one has to die. Daniel slowly raised his hands. What about Noah? The man laughed. The boy was never our target. We only needed something you couldn't ignore. Daniel realized the truth. Noah had been used as bait to bring everyone and the USB to one place. Suddenly, Detective Harris shouted, down! The cabin windows exploded. Smoke grenades rolled across the floor. The room filled with thick white smoke. Gunfire erupted. Daniel grabbed Emma's hand while Michael held onto the wall for support. This way! They rushed toward the back exit. Outside, Harris led them into the forest. After several minutes of running, they reached an abandoned ranger station. Everyone was exhausted. Michael looked at Daniel. They'll never stop chasing that USB. Daniel took it out of his pocket. Then we'll make sure it becomes useless. Emma looked confused. What do you mean? Daniel smiled. We don't need to keep it. We just need the world to see what's inside. Michael nodded. I can decrypt it. But once it's opened, there'll be no turning back. Daniel looked at Emma. She squeezed his hand. I'm with you. Michael connected the USB to his encrypted laptop. He placed his thumb on the fingerprint scanner. Then he entered a long password. The screen unlocked. Thousands of confidential files appeared. Hidden payments, secret contracts, bribery records, videos, voice recordings, everything. Michael looked at Daniel.
Ready?
Daniel took a deep breath. Do it. Michael pressed one final key. Every file was uploaded automatically to international news agencies, anti-corruption organizations, and secure government servers. Within seconds, phones across the country began buzzing with breaking news alerts. Largest medical corruption scandal in national history exposed. Emma looked at Daniel. It's over. Daniel shook his head. No. It's just beginning. At that very moment, Detective Harris received a call. His face turned pale. He looked at Daniel and whispered, They've found Noah. But he's not alone. Detective Harris lowered his phone slowly. Daniel stepped forward. Where is Noah? Harris looked him in the eyes. They found him at an abandoned warehouse near the old harbor. Emma sighed with relief. So he's alive? Harris nodded. Yes, but the kidnappers are still there. They're heavily armed. Daniel didn't hesitate. Take me there. 20 minutes later, police surrounded the abandoned warehouse. SWAT teams took their positions. Snipers watched from nearby rooftops. Inside the warehouse, Noah was tied to a chair. Standing beside him was the CEO of Meditech Pharmaceuticals, Victor Lang. He held a pistol in one hand. In the other, he held a remote detonator. Boxes filled with explosives were hidden throughout the building. Victor smiled as Daniel walked inside. I knew you'd come. Daniel looked at Noah. It's over, Victor. Victor laughed. No, it's over when I say it is. Emma, standing behind the police line, watched in fear. Victor raised the detonator. If I press this button, the whole warehouse explodes. Daniel took a slow step forward. What do you want? Victor's smile disappeared. I want the truth to disappear. It already hasn't, Daniel replied. The files have been released. The entire country knows. Victor's face twisted with anger. Then we'll all die together. He placed his thumb over the detonator. At that exact moment, Michael Hayes stepped out from behind a police vehicle.
Victor!
Victor turned. You... Michael raised a small device. I designed your security system years ago. He pressed a button. The red light on Victor's detonator suddenly went dark. It won't work anymore. Victor stared at it in disbelief. What did you do? I disabled the signal. Realizing he had lost, Victor grabbed Noah and pointed the gun at his head. No one move! Daniel slowly raised his hands. Take me instead. Victor laughed. You think you're a hero? No. Daniel replied calmly. I'm just a doctor. As Victor hesitated for a single second, bang! A SWAT sniper fired. The bullet struck Victor's shoulder. The gun fell to the floor. Police officers rushed inside. Within seconds, Victor Lang was handcuffed. Noah ran straight into Daniel's arms. It's okay, Daniel whispered. You're safe now. Outside the warehouse, Emma burst into tears and hugged Daniel tightly. For the first time in years, the nightmare was finally over. But as police led Victor to the patrol car, he smiled. Daniel noticed. Why are you smiling? Victor looked him straight in the eyes. Because you still don't know who gave the order to kill your family. Victor Lang smiled as the police escorted him toward the patrol car. Daniel stopped walking. What do you mean? Victor looked back one last time. For years you believed I was the mastermind. I wasn't. Daniel's heart pounded. Then who was? Victor laughed quietly. You'll never hear his name from me. Before anyone could ask another question, federal agents arrived. One of them handed Detective Harris an official document. The Attorney General has been arrested. The evidence from the USB was enough. Another officer approached. So have the Meditech executives, board members, and everyone involved in the cover-up. Victor lowered his head. For the first time, he realized it was truly over. 6 months later, the city looked different. The corruption scandal had changed the country's healthcare system forever. New laws were passed. Thousands of patients received justice. Daniel was offered his old position as chief cardiac surgeon at St. Mary's Hospital. This time, he accepted. On his first day back, he walked through the hospital doors, wearing his white coat with pride. Doctors and nurses applauded as he entered. Among them stood Noah, healthy, smiling, holding a small gift box. I have something for you, Noah said. Daniel opened it. Inside was the same drawing Noah had made after the surgery. But this time one more person had been added, Emma. The three of them were holding hands beneath a bright blue sky. At the top, Noah had written, Heroes never save people alone. Daniel looked at Emma. Without saying a word, he reached into his pocket and took out a small velvet box. Emma's eyes widened. He knelt on one knee. 5 years ago, I lost the people I loved most. I never thought my heart could heal. Then you got into my taxi. You didn't save my life in one day. You gave me a reason to live again. He opened the box. Inside was a simple diamond ring.
Emma,
Will you marry me? Tears rolled down her cheeks. She smiled through them. Yes. Yes, I will. The hospital hallway erupted in applause. Noah laughed and hugged them both. Months later, Daniel and Emma were married in a quiet ceremony. Instead of expensive gifts, they asked every guest to donate to a foundation that provided free heart surgeries for children who couldn't afford treatment. Outside the hospital, Daniel's old silver taxi was restored and placed in the hospital garden. A small plaque beside it read, Kindness can change a life. One ride, one heart, one second chance. And every Sunday, Daniel and Emma still took that taxi through the city, offering free rides to strangers, because sometimes the smallest act of kindness leads to the greatest love story. The end.